Weekend getaways, your perfect escape from reality, a chance to unplug, unwind, and relax. But for some, the dream retreat can quickly turn into a nightmare. Secluded cabins, remote beaches, hidden lake houses, these peaceful settings can hide something much darker. Tonight we're diving into 5 terrifying true weekend getaway horror stories that will send shivers down your spine. These are not just tales, they really happened. And by the end of this video, you may just think twice about your next vacation. John and Emily had been planning this trip for weeks, a cozy weekend at a secluded cabin deep in the woods. It was supposed to be the perfect escape, a break from the noise of city life, the kind of trip that refreshes your soul. But when they arrived, something felt off. The cabin, advertised as rustic, looked abandoned. Dusty windows, overgrown paths, and an unsettling quiet that hung in the air. That night, as they sat by the fire, they started to hear strange noises coming from outside. It began with the wind whistling through the trees, but then came the footsteps, slow, heavy, deliberate footsteps circling the cabin. At first, they thought it was just an animal, maybe a deer. But as the footsteps grew closer and more deliberate, their unease turned to fear. The steps stopped, right outside the door. John grabbed a flashlight and crept toward the door. When he swung it open, no one was there. The footsteps, however, had left something behind. In the soft dirt circling the cabin were footprints, human footprints. But there were no other cabins nearby, and no one else should have been in those woods. 6 friends rented a lakeside cabin for a fun weekend of swimming, fishing, and relaxing. It was supposed to be the perfect getaway from their busy lives. The lake was quiet, and the cabin was far enough from the nearest town that they felt like they had the world to themselves. But that second night, something strange happened. Wet footprints began appearing inside the cabin, leading from the lake right into the house. At first, they joked that one of them was playing a prank. But no one had been swimming, and the footprints were far too large to belong to any of them. One of the friends decided to go down to the lake to investigate. As he approached the water, he swore he saw something. Someone standing in the lake, just beneath the surface, barely visible in the moonlight. Panicking, he ran back to the cabin. They all agreed to lock the doors, close the windows, and wait until morning. But that night, they heard splashing, louder and louder. Something was moving in the lake. They stayed up all night, too afraid to sleep. The footprints were gone, the water still. But as they packed up to leave, one of them found something chilling, a handprint, wet and cold, on the inside of the cabin's window, facing the lake. Kim and her boyfriend thought they had found the perfect Airbnb for a romantic weekend away. An adorable cottage in the countryside, complete with rave reviews and a beautiful view of the hills. Everything seemed perfect. But that night, as they were settling in for bed, something strange happened. A soft tapping sound started coming from inside the walls. At first, they thought it was just the house settling, but the tapping didn't stop. It followed them, room to room. Then, at 3 a.m., Kim woke to something much worse. At the foot of their bed stood the shadow of a woman. Her eyes were sunken, her mouth open in a silent scream. Kim reached for the lamp, her heart pounding. But when the light came on, the woman was gone. They fled the house in the middle of the night, too terrified to stay another second. Later, they learned the house's former owner had disappeared years ago. And it said that her spirit haunts the walls, still trying to escape. For a family of 4, this beach house was meant to be the perfect vacation spot. Far from the crowded beaches, it offered solitude and beautiful ocean views. But on their second night, they began to notice something strange. At first, it was little things, flickering lights, strange cold drafts. But then they started hearing whispers, soft voices that seemed to come from the walls. The children complained of shadows moving in their room, but when the parents checked, there was nothing. As the nights went on, the whispers grew louder and the shadows more frequent. The family left early, unable to shake the feeling that they weren't alone in that house. Not every weekend getaway ends in rest and relaxation. For some, the perfect retreat can turn into an unforgettable nightmare. Next time you plan a trip, be careful where you go. You never know what might be waiting for you. Jake, Sarah, Alex, and Lisa had been looking forward to this weekend for months. They had rented a secluded mountain lodge, hidden deep within a vast national park. The idea was to disconnect from the world and reconnect with nature. When they first arrived, everything seemed perfect, the kind of place you'd want to come back to every year. But as the daylight faded and night fell, the lodge seemed to change. It wasn't just the isolation, it was something deeper, a creeping sense of being watched. After a long hike, they settled in for dinner. But outside, as the wind picked up, strange sounds echoed through the mountains, footsteps crunching in the gravel, distant voices carried on the breeze. At first, they shrugged it off, convinced it was the wind or animals moving in the trees. But then came the knock. There was no one there, just the cold mountain air and the distant rustle of trees. But Jake swore. He had seen something move just out of sight. He brushed it off, not wanting to worry the group. Maybe it was a deer, maybe a hiker, or maybe something else entirely. That night, Sarah woke to a tapping on her window. It was soft at first, like the brush of a tree branch, but then it grew louder. Tap, tap, tap. She looked out, expecting to see nothing but the darkness of the forest, but her breath caught in her throat. A shadowy figure was standing there just outside the window, watching her. She froze, barely able to breathe. Then, without warning, the figure moved away, melting into the shadows of the trees. They searched the entire area around the lodge but found nothing. No footprints, no sign of anyone being there. By morning, the group was on edge, tired from a night of uneasy sleep. But they weren't ready to leave just yet. They convinced themselves it was all in Sarah's head. Maybe just a trick of the light, maybe her imagination. But that second night, something happened that none of them could explain. Around midnight, the power went out. The lodge was plunged into darkness, the only light coming from the moon outside. Then the noises began again. Footsteps, whispers, things moving in the shadows. Suddenly, the door swung open. It wasn't the wind. Something had forced it open, and standing in the doorway was a figure, just like the one Sarah had seen the night before. Its outline was human, but its movements were unnatural, jerky, as though it didn't quite know how to walk. They didn't stop running until they reached their car, leaving everything behind. They drove straight through the night, back to the nearest town, not daring to look back. When they told the locals about the strange figure, the townspeople just shook their heads. No one lived near the lodge, and no one had for years. But there were rumors. Old stories about strange sightings in the woods. Stories they hadn't believed. Until now. Not every weekend retreat is an escape from reality. Sometimes it's a step into a nightmare. Be careful where you choose to stay, because you never know what might already be living there.